All right, it's official. Okay, now I'm going to start sharing my slides. Welcome everyone to one of our Discovery Cafe series where we're just basically trying to have an informal and accessible Q&A session to answer questions for students that they might have. I'm going to start sharing a few slides, but this is going to be very interactive as well. All right, and I'll put this in presentation mode. And then I'm going to do my best to make sure I can monitor the chat at the same time. So that's one of the challenges of sharing slides, is keeping track of that. And then I'm also going to monitor participants and continue to add them as they join. All right, so we've kind of entitled this How to Get Involved with Research, the Next Steps, or maybe you have some more advanced questions. You've been considering a few things. So I just want to briefly mention that you have hopefully seen some of our information telling you about the jobs and careers involved with research. There are lots of opportunities. And so having research, even if you don't know what you want to do, or if you already know the careers you're interested in, these are things that are going to benefit you. And so take advantage of it and know that it's going to give you transferable skills that are applicable in many areas that you might pursue. I love to, advertise the benefits. Hopefully you're already aware of them, but I especially want to remind you it's more than just a rec letter. You do get a great rec letter, hopefully, because this is one of the opportunities that you have to work closely with faculty members and take advantage of an in-depth relationship where they can comment on your skills. But you're also going to have the chance to earn credit, sharpen critical thinking and analytical skills, apply knowledge, be curious, increase your confidence, work as a team with other people. You're also going to meet a lot of people that you share passion with. I'm still best friends with some of the people I met from undergrad research teams. All right. And if you're not convinced, a few statistics: 93% of employers say that it's really your demonstrated capacity to think critically, communicate, and solve problems. So it's your skills that are more important than the major that you have. So doing research is a chance to really practice and build these skills. And then, of course, hopefully you are very aware that the Undergraduate Research Center has numerous services and resources online. We have workshops. During the year, we try to do these in person, but we are doing as many as possible currently in the virtual Zoom format and online. Many of them are recorded. We also have slides available. So these include things like how to get involved in research, how to write an abstract, how to give a presentation. We also do group advising during the year. Right now, we're trying to do these larger sessions to get as much information to students as possible. During the year, when the offices are open and students are attending conferences, we also do things like print posters. And then we have a variety of awards and fundings that we'll let you know more about as well. So I do want to mention that there are some common undergraduate research myths. And in general, let's just say one of our goals is to, be the myth busters. And I hope that you've overcome some of those, but I do want to touch on those, and in the questions, we'll come back to those. Things like research only happens in the lab. That's not true. And that's really important to consider right now when you're trying to think about research opportunities that might be available during times when our campus is not completely open. We have restricted capacity in labs. So there are opportunities for field work, data analysis, data science initiatives, archival work. There are actual examples to do surveys. I know one chemistry major is a double major in political science. And so they're actually doing some poli-sci research right now. So you can also complement your research skills as well. And it's also a big one. Some people say, oh, I don't already have research experience. How can I get a position? So you do have some experience, and we'll tell you today about how you can get some additional experience that will support you in getting a research experience. But most importantly, your curiosity and your motivation are the key things, because most of the research that you're going to be doing is not something where you've had experience in it before, or where you've had the chance to take the exact class that relates to that topic. And things like you do not have to do research related to your major. It can be completely different from your major. So that might also be extremely relevant right now when you're considering how to get involved with research when some research opportunities aren't available. Okay, so I'm gonna, we can come back and touch on these later, but most importantly, I just wanna say, chances are things you've heard may be myths, and so come to us as the experts or ask around and, double check some of the things you might be hearing. So we're going to bust those myths as much as possible. All right, in the interest of time, I'm going to try to move forward with some action items. And one of the first things I want to tell you is if you haven't already done an informational interview, this is an action item I strongly recommend. This is great for getting involved with research, but it's also great in the future or now as you're thinking about different career options, different research areas. And now is a really good time to interview someone, essentially when people are available by email, phone, or Zoom. So an informational interview can be something where you interview a graduate student, a TA, a faculty, another undergraduate researcher. You can ask them about, how they picked their research position. What do they like most about it? What does it look like? So in addition to the general information we provide to you here, you can get very specific information associated with different research labs, different research areas. Maybe you're interested in someone who's doing data science research and you want to find out more about that because you're considering that more now than you might have in the past. Especially then if you're thinking about informational interviews associated with getting a job, when you ask those who have careers, you can find out, what did they do prior to getting that job? What skills are most helpful? Because the idea that what you might think someone does in that job might be different than what they're actually doing. But most importantly, this is also just a great way to build a network, build confidence in talking to people, because an informational interview is just telling someone you're an expert and I would appreciate learning from your experience rather than saying, hey, give me a job or give me a research position. But sometimes informational interviews lead to research positions and lead to jobs, so it can have a double bonus. So that's one action item. If you haven't done these, consider this. And if you have been doing some, think about some additional ones. Or maybe you've interviewed a friend and now you want to interview a graduate student or a faculty member. Okay, so in terms of an action item, I know there's some questions about contacting faculty. So I know this can be a little bit intimidating. I also know that sometimes faculty don't respond. The first thing I'd love to remind you about is that faculty are human beings and they're also really busy. They might be experiencing, anxiety with the current situations. They might have family complications. So just like we hope that faculty are understanding about students having different situations, you do have to be understanding that faculty sometimes have complications as well. And if you, for example, email them at the start of the quarter when they're teaching a 500-person lecture class, they might unfortunately not be able to respond as quickly. So don't let that intimidate you, but just know that if you don't hear back immediately, don't take it personally. They might just be at a particularly busy time. So my first advice, of course, is that if you can meet with someone in person, that's better. That's the advice we normally give, but we know that that's not currently possible. So what I would recommend is that you try to think about, are there faculty you can contact before or after class? Can you attend their office hours? And many faculty are having office hours even on Zoom, so you can attend those. You can also ask to attend a research group meeting. So for example, my research group, I'm in the Department of Chemistry, we hold research group meetings and my graduate students and undergraduate students are presenting on different topics, or we have different brainstorming meetings. And so you can attend research group meetings and learn about the research that's going on. And this is a way of expressing your interest and your motivation, and sometimes can be a way to build that relationship even before or even if they don't yet have a position available. Now, of course, email is one of the best ways to contact faculty, and you do want to be considerate and have good email etiquette. You want to have a professional email, and my biggest advice is to express curiosity and motivation. So if you send an email to 10 different faculty at the same time, you're probably not going to be able to sufficiently express your motivation for all of their research, which might have differences associated with it. So you want to write individual emails to faculty. And in some cases, I know students will say, oh, I didn't get a response, but that's because you may have sent a very generic email or may have emailed multiple faculty at the same time. And sometimes the faculty will say, oh, hey, did you get this email? I just got an email from students. And, faculty will just know that, if 3 people or 1 person emailed the same 3 faculty, they might be less likely to respond. So you really want to have a reason for contacting a faculty member and show that you know about their research area, you have a motivation, and you have curiosity. Following up, it is really important to follow up. So it might be expected that you might not hear back from a faculty member immediately. It is okay to follow up, and actually it can set you apart just because it again shows that motivation and curiosity that you have to learn more about their research. It shows that you're still interested. It shows that you're willing to be proactive, right? So, and it's not rude to send a follow-up email, but when you send a follow-up email, you can think about how to do it in a way that remains professional and perhaps adds additional information. So maybe in the first email, you talk about a paper you read. In your second email, you might ask them about their office hours, or ask to attend a research meeting, or show that you read an additional paper from their research. And I often am not always able to respond to all emails, or sometimes I miss one. So if a student sends me a follow-up email, I'm actually more likely to respond, especially if I feel guilty from missing that first email. All right, and briefly, I did want to just include this. I know some of you may have seen this. When writing a professional email, this is kind of the breakdown of the details you want to include. And as I indicated previously, you really want to emphasize curiosity and motivation. Please make sure to indicate who you are, what your class level and major is. That is useful to faculty members. Some faculty members really want to have a diverse team based on the year as well as the major, from engineering, biotechnology, food science, chemistry, biology. So you can really build that up. The other thing is that you'll want to be able to think about indicating your interest in this specific mentor or research area. So for example, you might be thinking about the research that sorry, a little bit of background noise there. You might be thinking specifically about the research that they've been working on, and talk about that. Mention that you've looked at their website, mention that you've looked at the research papers that they've published. Those are ways to show your specific interest in their research area. You can also indicate availability, what skills you have, indications of your motivation, and also then of course be polite and professional and thank them for listening. Use like professional starts and ends to your email or letter. Okay, so let me get ahead. Oh, I just have one example of this good email. And here this student happened to be in a class. So if you have been in someone's class, make reference to that. Or if you've met them at a networking session, or if you've, let's see, if you attended a panel where they talked about their research. Anything that you can do to show a connection is important. And if you haven't done that, then you want to refer to their website and say, I've looked at your website, I've read your papers, things like that. And so this is just an example. And again, these slides, I think these slides are actually already posted online. So I just wanted to briefly touch on that. And then of course, you do not have to include a CV or resume, but this can also give additional information and does give an overall professional appearance to your email. Okay, so the overviews, which many of you already know, is to think perhaps about making a list of possibilities that what interests you, look at the websites, papers, talk to TAs, contact professors directly. And I know some of you have probably already done this, so we're going to talk in a little more detail about what to do after you've already kind of gone through some of the basic steps. I do want to just indicate here my recommendations for some remote action items. So as I indicated previously, even currently now, while we don't have some of our normal ways to get involved with research, here are some things that you can do to build your professional resume or CV, or become more involved with research. So ask to attend a research group meeting, perform informational interviews, particularly with research groups that you're interested in, or facilities that have technologies that you're interested in. Find department seminars or virtual department seminars. And so when fall starts, one of the advantages, I guess, of our current situation is there is no need for people to fly across country to give an amazing seminar. So a lot of department seminars are going to be on Zoom so that more students can benefit. And we also have speakers from all over the country and all over the world coming to talk about their research. So find these department seminars and use this opportunity to learn more about research. Practice searching the literature and writing a literature review. Attend a virtual conference. ACS just completed this week, and SACNAS is coming up, as well as some other conferences in specific areas. So these can be great opportunities. They're rather affordable, and the Undergraduate Research Center has a virtual travel award to cover the registration costs for virtual conferences. So we encourage you to find a conference and attend this conference, and you'll be able to submit for a virtual travel award to cover the registration costs. There's also lots of webinars and tutorials. The jove.com videos, I'll mention this more in a minute, is one of my favorite resources, and also online laboratory safety training. And one of our links, we also have these interdisciplinary tutorials as well. So here's the website that we have on our URC website, the online resources to stay involved with research. So check this out so you can find it. It's online research resources that will give you some additional information and ideas. Now, the two things I recommend are the safety services. If you haven't already done safety training, this is a way of getting a head start. You can also, when you write an email to faculty members, tell them that you've already completed safety training, because it shows that you're motivated and proactive. Now, we have included this note here and on our website that for students, you have to contact the staff and professional services, or staff development and professional services, to be added, just to have access to those. So you'll have to do one step to basically pre-register before registering. But there's things like UC laboratory safety fundamentals, there's cryogenic training, there's a variety of trainings. These are all online. Some of them are 20 minutes, some of them are 2 hours. And individual labs may have additional safety training, but these will provide you with the requirements for many of the safety training on campuses. The other thing I recommend is Jove. So jove.com is a fabulous resource for both education and research. So your grade will get better in your lab classes, and here you'll be able to see examples of research in action. So while you can't be in lab shadowing a new graduate student, you can go here and see examples of research. And so this is basically a journal. This is peer reviewed. It's on our library website, but you can go to jove.com, and we have access through UC Davis. So definitely check this out. All right, at this point, we're almost done, and then I'm going to open it up to Q&A, starting with some of the Q&A submitted. But just one reminder that we do have lots of programs and awards. So if you've already found a research position and you're looking for some funding, we have opportunities for that. And after you've done some research, there will be awards that can recognize your accomplishments. And then here I do highlight the travel and conference registration awards that I hope you'll take advantage of. And then we also have some other awards that happen during or towards the end of the year. The Provost Undergraduate Fellowship is a mini grant where you can receive funding to support your research. And again, all of these are listed on our websites, and this is just a quick reminder or summary so that I can get to the Q&A. All right, and then our sponsored research programs, here's just an example highlighting some of these, and I encourage you to check these out, especially if you're a first generation student or a transfer student, for many of these programs are focused on. Okay, let me skip that. Okay, so again, hopefully you have our contact information. We're busting those myths, hopefully giving you as much information as possible. You've seen hopefully resources online. And so the goal of today is to try to give you some opportunity for Q&A. And so I have some questions that I will revert to, but first I'm actually going to switch out of stop sharing mode, just because it's always hard not to see faces, so I can see your faces for a few minutes. I have the lists of all the questions that were submitted in advance, but I do want to give a chance for people to ask questions in the chat or unmute yourself, and we can start with a little bit more of a personal Q&A session before I go into the pre-submitted ones. If you had a pre-submitted one, you can ask that now as well.
I had a question.
Yeah, hi, Caitlin.
Hi. So I am a transfer student, and so I only have theoretically 2 years left at Davis. And everybody that I had talked to before was like, oh, you can make connections during your first year at Davis and then possibly be able to get into research your last year. So that is more difficult now that we can't actually go up and talk to the professors after class. You did mention emailing. Do you think that's the best option to kind of make those connections during this first little bit?
Yeah, and I want to put a positive spin on what you said. I don't know. I think faculty are stuck at home right now. They can't travel to conferences. It's kind of a better time to connect with faculty. It's just unfortunately their labs aren't as open for you to get into the lab. So especially if you're a transfer student or a sophomore or junior, you have a little bit of you have a little bit of time so that you can actually take advantage of this time to make those connections. And so use that time. And, you know, I know it can be really, I guess, sometimes uncomfortable contacting faculty or reaching out, but that's also a skill in and of itself. Writing a professional email, going through the practice of contacting someone and maybe not getting the first, you know, hit that you thought, and then writing someone else and refining, that is a skill that you're learning and practicing. So even if you don't get the first position that you want, you will be building skills and benefiting yourself by looking up research and contacting faculty, right? So just keep in mind that that's all positive. Whatever you're doing right now is positive. I would probably say that if you're just binge watching Netflix, I'm going to put that on the not positive list, but the things where you're being proactive and maybe pushing yourself out of your comfort zone are going to be benefiting you. All right. So yeah, email is the best way. And then when the fall quarter starts, faculty are going to have office hours. They're going to have Zoom. They're going to have ways for you to submit questions on chats. They're going to have multiple modes that you can hopefully facilitate communication with them, and just take advantage of those, right? Especially if you're taking a class from someone, you know, getting to know them is a really good way to approach it. Doing an informational interview with your TA, with a graduate student, those are all highly recommended. In some cases, the way to get into a lab or research position is to contact the graduate student as a TA or a graduate student researcher, because if they go to the faculty member and say, oh, I met this really motivated student, I would be happy to mentor them. Right. So sometimes the faculty isn't even involved with the decision. Right. And so I have some where the students come to me and join my lab. I have other cases where the students are in a lab of someone and the TA is really enthusiastic. And it's not necessarily because they're the best student. It's they're the student who asked the most questions. Right. They're the students that was just curious. And so I think that's important to remember, that TAs and graduate students are a really good resource as well. All right. Xiaohua, I see your hand raised.
Hi.
Yeah.
I kind of have a I don't know, difficult question to answer, because I'm a mechanical engineering major, and I wrote a few letters to my professors, and like one of them responded like to offer me a position in his team, but it's kind of awkward that he required a U.S. citizenship to kind of be on the team, and I don't know if that's like universal situation or not, but like, in my case, what do you recommend me to do, or do you want me to like pursue other positions in other majors, like, I don't know, like computer science or other position?
Yeah, that's a great question. It is definitely not universal that you need to be a citizen. There are many international students involved. There may be some research that some faculty do that have confidential components to it, specifically working for the Department of Defense, the Department of Energy. So it could be unique to one aspect of a project that they do. So that would mean that other faculty members would not have that requirement. I have never asked that for students, and I often have visiting scholars come from other countries specifically to do research in my lab. So I think that you can, it may mean that you won't get into that lab, but it will be not a problem in other labs, right? Or other teams. So I would also talk to the advisors in your department, because they may know specifically if some faculty are more likely to work with international students. We also have the website that has the past 5 years of conference presentations that students have done, and you can look up by department, you can look up by faculty member and see, you know, what types of projects students do. And obviously you can't tell if they're working with international students or not, but if someone's working with a lot of students, they might be working with a more diverse group of students rather than if they only have one student on a team.
Right. And the website you mean is the UC Davis Undergraduate Research Center?
Yeah, at the URC, we have something that has all the prior conference pages. I don't think I can hop out and get that back in, but we will, what I'm going to do is any questions we don't get through today, I'm going to add to our FAQ so that we can list the answers there and continue to kind of build a database of questions and answers for all the students. So I'll try to, I'll make sure that's listed there.
All right. Thank you. Thank you
Great,
very much.
thanks. All right, I see Edie.
Hi. Okay, so before this, I didn't know that you could do your research in something that's not your major. I thought it had to be specific to your major. So I did some political science research. How do I incorporate that into like a letter that I would send to a prospective professor?
Okay, great. Yeah, so I'm glad we're busting some myths there. That's our goal. Any research that you do helps demonstrate critical thinking skills and motivation and interest. So I think you're saying you've previously done political science research and now you're doing something in another area and you want to be able to leverage that. Is that correct? Okay. So in this case, and I can see your head shaking, so I can, thanks. So it's funny how when you're on Zoom, sometimes you miss all those like normal cues that you get from talking to someone in person. Yeah, so what I would say is you can explain how you've had research experience and you benefited, you know, the critical thinking, or explain some of the skills. You know, if you are applying to a STEM-based position, you know, I think if you'd said, oh, hey, I painted a lot and I did these creative works. Creative works is a form of research and creative activities, but it's not quite the same as saying, I analyzed these papers, I read these papers, I wrote this report, I looked up literature. So for any field, looking up literature, reading papers, writing, communication, synthesizing new ideas. Like in my lab, we synthesize molecules, but in all areas, we try to synthesize new ideas. So you want to think about what skills you feel you bring from that. And it could be that maybe what you want to do is find a really cool connection between, you did some science or public policy research. Maybe there is STEM research that is involved specifically with areas where public policy and science policy, you know, like energy efficiency. And so you can say like, oh, through my interest and through my science or public policy research or science, you know, these other policy areas and political science, I learned more about the critical role that science plays in informing these policies, right? So you can kind of think about what is the bridge between the two. And maybe you only realize that now, but it provides a compelling story, right? Yeah.
Thank you.
Great, thanks.
I had a quick question.
Yeah, great. Hi, Jordan, right?
Yeah, hi. So my question was, say you've reached out to a faculty and they haven't responded. How long do you think is like a reasonable time frame to follow up with them? So it's not too soon, but it's not like too far off either.
Yeah, so that's a great question. You know, 12 hours or 24 hours later is a little too soon, right? And it does depend. If it's during finals week, you would expect students or faculty to have an impacted schedule and maybe not be able to respond because they've got massive emails coming in from students and TAs. I personally know faculty members that evacuated and had a house burned down recently. So, you know, if there's current situations going on, faculty, just like everyone, may be experiencing a personal crisis such that they can't respond. So just keep that in mind. And the reason I say that is only like, don't take it personally that, oh, I'm not good enough, that's why they didn't email me back. So I would say 3 days to 7 days is a reasonable time frame to follow up. Even if you wait for 2 weeks, that's also fine. If it's after 2 weeks, you know, that might be too long. If it's earlier than 3 days, that's probably too soon, right? But I have had students follow up with me the quarter after, like they initially contacted me and said, oh, I wanted to let you know I have continued to be interested. I've now finished this class and I feel even more excited or more prepared to pursue a research area, in my case, chemistry. So if you do wait and then you have additional information you want to provide, that's great. Usually when you follow up with them, you don't have to provide additional information, but it's always helpful to say, oh, since the original email, I've looked up another one of your papers and, you know, had additional questions or wanted to ask you more about that topic. Yeah, so, but I would say 3 to 14 days is kind of a good range maybe.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, great. All right, so give me a thumbs up. Should I switch to some of the pre-submitted questions? Because I'm sure there's a few in there that are relevant. Does anyone have a really, okay, great. Oh yeah, go ahead, Jordan.
I had one more if we have time.
Yeah.
So say we're not able to like completely understand the professor's research like with our current knowledge, but we're still interested. How do we kind of leverage that? Like, you know, do we just kind of like say, I don't understand everything, but I'm interested in learning more? Or
Absolutely. Yeah. And just know that you're not expected to understand everything. And for the record, if I read some of my colleagues' papers, I don't understand everything, right? We become very specific in our fields, and you're not expected to understand it all. The idea is to show motivation and an interest or curiosity about it. So typically with every paper, there is an introduction that tries to put something in context. Like if someone's working with a method to reduce CO2 because of greenhouse gas effects, that could be a catalyst that's converting CO2 into polymers, or it could be a cool method of converting carbon dioxide into rocks, or it could be a new engineering method to capture CO2, right? But you will still be able to connect with what is the overall importance of that area. And maybe in some cases that it's more abstract. We are interested in synthesizing these complex molecules because they've just never been made before, right? So having some understanding or showing that you at least looked at the papers is an important first step. And also knowing that when you read a paper, and I know Caitlin and a few other people have heard this from me if you've talked to me before, the idea of not reading the whole paper from start to finish. Like, don't feel like you have to read to the beginning and read to the end, understand everything. You know, read the title, the intro paragraph and the conclusion, and that kind of summarizes everything that's key. And then there's a lot of really technical stuff in between. But what you can see from that technical stuff is, are they building equipment to capture CO2? Are they using a new method to monitor CO2? So you can kind of get a sense of what are the methods. Are they going out into the field to collect the CO2 in positions all over the world? So you're going to get a sense of what type of research is going on so that you can, you know, have a slightly educated but not perfect understanding of the area. Yeah, and that's also, while the research is not going on, being able to read more about a topic is going to benefit you and also help you get into a lab more effectively once the labs are more open up. So.
Thank you so much.
Great. Yeah, and I apologize. I know there's people. I might know a few other people on the call. I can only see one page of the people attending. So hi to everyone that I know already. Okay, let me switch back really quick. I think I'm gonna go back to sharing and answer a few questions that were submitted before, because there were some great ones. And I'm gonna try to go through them as quickly as possible, and then see if there's more that follow up on some of them. So we did kind of touch on it. Can you have a non-STEM major but perform research in STEM? Absolutely. There are some things that are technical where that research might not have a diverse or interdisciplinary team, but there's a lot of really interesting research that's very interdisciplinary. And so they want to have people who have different skill sets. So don't rule yourself out based on that. And I think if I were to get in a request from a student and said, oh, I'm a communications major and I'm agricultural or managerial economics, you know, there's some things that I would be like, oh, interesting. We were thinking about doing a cost benefit analysis of something, or understanding the market analysis. So there could be ways to integrate that into the research. So what is the best research to participate in, prepare for medical school, and how will research or internship opportunities be affected by remote learning? So the first one, for a lot of students who are considering dental school, pharmacy school, medical school, it can be helpful if your research relates to biology or sciences, but it's not required, because the real research and the reason that stands out for anyone applying to medical, dental, or pharmacy school is the fact that you've worked with your hands, you have developed technical skills, and you've thought critically, and you've had to communicate with a team. And so a lot of the skills that come from research are not necessarily specific to one research area, but they are skills that you get from not just learning in a lecture class or not even a lab class, but digging into a topic where literally you don't know anything about it and you're learning new things for yourself and for the field. So almost any research field can be good preparation. So you should really then, the advice would be to follow whatever you're excited or passionate about, because that's going to make you enjoy it the most, and then that's going to be best reflected when you apply and write about your research on the applications. All right, so how will research or internships opportunities be affected by remote learning? So yes, sometimes research is necessary to be in a lab, or it is improved by having interactions between a team member. In this case, unfortunately, there are some research positions and internships that cannot be offered, but most people are working to provide opportunities online and in virtual settings. So don't make assumptions too soon about what the opportunities are. There are increased opportunities for data science. So if you have any coding experience or you want to get coding experience, now is a great time. If you are wanting to do any archival research, even if you don't know coding experience, there's some really good opportunities for data science where you can actually look up data related to, for example, the elections coming up, or look up data related to the spread of disease and how policy and regional policy affects state policy and national policy or distribution. So you might just have to be a little more flexible and broader, open to broader opportunities than you would have been before. All right, where can I find research involving animals? Well, we have a vet school and we have a lot of people doing a lot of great research with animal biology and animal science. So I would go to the School of Veterinary Medicine and also the animal biology and animal science departments. You can also look up examples from our conference to see abstracts where students have presented research involving animals. And by doing a search, if you have a favorite animal, you can actually do a keyword search in all of the PDFs. And hopefully soon we're going to have a more searchable database that covers all 3 to 5 years of the past conferences. But right now we have searchable PDFs on a website at the URC conference page. If there's a quarter where we have a particularly heavy unit count, is it not recommended to participate in research? For this one, I would say don't get started. Maybe if it's your first quarter starting, it would be harder to have that level of commitment, although sometimes the first quarter is shadowing and doing safety training. So in that case, it could be a good way of just easing in. But if you're already started in research, you can actually maintain a baseline level, even if you do have a heavy unit count. You would just want to have very strong and clear communication with your research advisor, excuse me, to let them know that you have a particularly heavy unit count that quarter. So communication and planning in advance can be really important. Is it better to apply to many short-term positions or a few long-term projects? Well, I'll give you my standard advice, and there's a caveat given our current situation with the pandemic. Generally, I recommend a longer-term project because you're going to dig in deeper and develop more critical thinking skills. You're going to be more likely to present your research at a conference or publish your research. Having a visible, documented evidence of your research participation, like a conference presentation or a publication, is a really important way to showcase for careers or graduate school applications your commitment and your depth of interaction with that research team. You're also going to get a stronger recommendation letter if you work with one faculty for a longer period of time. So short-term research projects can be beneficial if you're trying to figure out what you're interested in, and you should not stay in a research project if it's not a good fit. But the idea of sampling different projects makes it more like a class or a lab rather than a true research experience. Because part of what research is being involved long enough to have things not work and have them not work several times and having to push through and then coming to that success of when they do work and understanding that process and that feeling of accomplishment that comes with that. So I generally recommend longer term projects, but that right now that may not be as feasible as we would hope. All right, sometimes there are preferred requirements in the applicant descriptions, but seeing as most undergrads have little to no experience, how strongly do these attributes weigh in considering an applicant? So I would say it does depend. Some faculty have so many students interested in their research area that they can have preferred requirements, but I would say you should absolutely apply regardless of whether you feel like you meet them. They said preferred, they didn't say absolute requirements. And I personally, for example, if someone has a lower GPA, I don't consider that, whereas some faculty may choose to rely on GPA more often. Some people will really want you to have taken a certain lab class just because it might give you a head start, but they are still happy to train you in the additional instrumentation or techniques that they have in their lab. So it's great to have those guidelines potentially as a requirement, but I would say, remember, it's preferred, it's not mandated. And I mean, don't completely ignore them, but don't dwell on them or worry about it. I would still apply if it's something you're interested in. Now, I would say if you feel like you don't necessarily meet those, make sure you go out of your way to express your motivation and your curiosity so that you can showcase that you do bring a lot, even if you haven't taken one class yet. For example, I had a student who wanted to join my research group and hadn't completed organic chemistry yet. And usually I like students to have taken their organic chemistry courses. But she was very persistent, very proactive, and demonstrated her motivation even though she hadn't taken those classes yet. And so she joined my group. All right, a few more questions. Okay, my thing is overlapping. Someone says they're most curious about how to get involved with research on campus as transfer students. So what are the first steps? So the first steps are going to be similar whether you're a junior, a sophomore, or a transfer student or not. But I would say that as a transfer student, sometimes you're adjusting to campus and you feel like you have to get a head start faster. So the first steps are to go to the page that outlines, I would say, the PDF. Well, the first step is to be here. Good job. But then go to the conference page where we have a link to all of the conference abstracts from the past, I think it's actually 10 years now, but they're all searchable PDFs. And so you can just start getting a sense of what are the research areas, what faculty are working with students the most. You know, if a faculty has a student that's presented every year in the conference, then you know they're really involved with mentoring undergraduate students. So I think kind of identifying those faculty members is a great first step. Also doing informational interviews. So talk to graduate students, talk to other undergraduate students, and ideally if the opportunity arises, talk to faculty as well. All right, this next one is a great one. How to know if the research opportunity is right for you. Well, the reality is any research opportunity is going to give you skills. So all of them will have some benefit and will be right for you in some ways. They will teach you professional skills just by applying for the position or writing an email. You'll learn communication skills. You'll learn technical skills. You'll probably learn critical thinking skills. So right for you might be based on is it most fitting with your interests? Well, you should have the best understanding of, is it something you're passionate about? But I would say you can learn more and narrow it down by doing informational interviews, by looking at websites. Also look at the culture or social interactions of the lab. Some labs have a very strong community. Not right now, but my lab, we would have a picnic in the summer. We would go have a winter activity, go ice skating. We don't do it much anymore, but for a while we were well known for always going to play paintball, which was just good teamwork and team spirit. So if you want to have a research lab that also has that kind of social network, then you want to ask about that as well. But I wouldn't pick it just for the social network. It's just kind of an added benefit because you get to know people better. So answering that question, you know, that is going to be up to you, but any research position you do is going to give you some important skills for the next step. And one little short anecdote, my first undergraduate research experience when I was in college was doing some biochemistry work, which in retrospect was not right for me. It was not, I didn't want to end up doing biochemistry, but it ended up being the best thing possible because initially I had a biochemistry professor who incorporated a lot of organic chemistry and mechanism. And I was like, wow, biochemistry is so great. We get to draw all these curved arrows and think about mechanism. And when I did biochemistry research, it was the right experience for me because it told me I didn't want to do that for graduate school. And from there, I shifted more to an organic lab. And then that's what I did for graduate school. So sometimes it's right for you because you realize it's not right for you. And then you can make different plans for the future. So there's lots of interesting ways to interpret that. Okay, so I probably won't be able to get through all this because I have another meeting right after 1, but I'm going to try to go through. Well, let me just show you. I have this slide and also this slide. So these are all the questions that you guys submitted and some other people submitted who might not have been able to attend. So I'm going to answer these questions. We're going to add them to our Q&A to put them online, because if you had these questions, other people probably had these questions. So I want to just go back to the chat or give people a chance to open up in the last 10 minutes. If there are any of these questions that you're particularly interested in, please put them in the chat now. Great. Edie asked about academic credit. Yes, so you can register for academic credit. You don't have to, but you're encouraged to do this because it's then on your transcript. You can also apply for transcript notation, which is an option for internships as well as research. Academic credit shows and confirms that you took it, but it's not a requirement because you'll often have a recommendation letter. You'll be able to explain the research activities that you did. But we do encourage you to register for academic credit, just because then you also put it into your schedule and you balance it with your other workload. And also for some, I know in chemistry, you can do 199 or 194, and 194H is the honors, and that one actually has a letter grade associated. So that's a good reason to register for credit, because you can get a letter grade associated with your research experience. And usually that's an A, so that's great, right? Okay, Luis, can you still get involved with research after getting your bachelor's? So obviously you can apply to graduate school. You can work as a junior specialist, and some people actually get involved as an undergrad and then stay in their same lab as a junior specialist to continue doing research. So that's a possibility. You cannot do undergraduate research once you've graduated. So that's one thing. You can't register for credit. So there are other ways, but it just wouldn't be through the same steps as you would for an undergraduate. Thanks for that question too. All right, Renee, how to stand out without lab experience. So you heard me say it earlier, but definitely demonstrating your motivation and curiosity is a key feature. So looking at the website, reading some of the papers, doing an informational interview. If you do an informational interview, you can also say to that faculty member when you email them, oh, I spoke with your graduate student about their recent research, and I was excited for the following reasons. So anything that shows that you're motivated. So I always tell people, I don't expect someone to come in having done the work we do in our lab. And I know, especially in some of the other labs that have specialized instrumentation, they know you're not going to have that research experience. So really, we know we can teach you the technical details. We can't teach you curiosity, and we can't teach you motivation. So anything you can do to showcase that you have those skills, I feel like I can teach you the organic chemistry or the technical skills of my research. So think about that as a way to emphasize that. Also, by sending a professional email, making the best first impression. If you send an email that just says, hey, professor, I'm interested in your lab. Do you have a position? Let me know. Thanks. Like, that is the functional email. Even if you say, dear Professor Franz, that makes it sound more professional, but a very short email is likely to not get a response and definitely less likely to get you a position because you haven't indicated your motivation or curiosity. All right, Daniel says, where to look for data science research opportunities? Is there anything preventing undergrads from continuing their projects after graduation? So we have a data science initiative on campus, and that's run through the library, and they have sometimes first-year seminar courses as well as data science classes as well as research opportunities. So they sometimes help connect data science research with existing labs or know about opportunities. They also will be having a data challenge in the fall quarter with some substantial cash prizes. And that basically is prompting you to do some independent research and then having awards related to that. So those are some places. You can also go to that great list of PDF abstracts from the conferences and do a search for data science or data analysis or coding or things that would help guide you also to the areas where that might be involved. I'm going to stop my share so I can see the chat, but so that I can see faces too. All right, and then you asked about also if there's anything preventing undergrads from continuing their projects after graduation. You can always continue during the summer and actually continue to be paid even. You can also, you don't usually register for credit in the summer, but you can stay on as an undergraduate research assistant for a while, but there is kind of a time limit associated with that before you have to either be hired as a junior specialist or be transferring as a graduate student. But I think it's 6 months might be the time frame. Denise says, can lab techniques you've learned during a high school course or college lab be considered lab experience, or does it need to be from a research lab? So it would definitely be considered lab experience. It just wouldn't be considered research experience. Yeah, so any class you have that gives you technical or lab skills, definitely mention that. If you've used a pipette before, great. If you've run a column before, if you've used a rotabot before, like mention those skills. If you've happened to have used an NMR in a class, you know, mention these things. Especially, I know in many cases, if you've transferred from a community college, you may have done slightly more advanced labs. Some community colleges have been very effective in getting instrumentation and equipment, so that you may have used an HPLC or a GC when someone in our larger class, undergraduate classes here may not yet have done that. So yeah, definitely put that in. And you can also use that as a way of showing your motivation. Like, wow, when I did this lab experience or this lab opportunity and technical skills, I just realized how much I loved that aspect of it. Where will the recordings be published? The recordings will be published on our URC website, and I can't tell you how pleased I am that I actually remembered to record this. So yeah, this and the other 2 recordings will all be published online, and Lolita Atkins, our fabulous program manager, is running the other session, and she'll have some questions and answers that are somewhat related to these, so you definitely want to listen to some of the advice that she has, because she's been involved with a lot of faculty and a lot of programs, so her insight is also valuable. From Brenda, what is the next time to contact professors for research opportunities? And can I just contact them? Can I contact professor before just to ask questions? I don't quite understand the way you phrased that second one, but the next time to contact professors for research opportunity, now is a completely good time. The very start of the quarter is a really hectic time because there's faculty meetings are starting, new classes are starting. So right now is a good time. They might still be teaching a summer session class, but they might not be as busy as some of the other classes or other times. And also if you contact them now, then you can follow up when the quarter starts. They're about 2 weeks into the quarter. Yeah, so that would be a good time now, but if you don't hear from them, it just means you have a good chance to follow up. And I think if your question there was to contact professor just to ask questions, yeah, so you can do it. You can contact a professor for an informational interview. They may or may not have time, but it does express your interest. I would say that if you contact them for an informational interview or anytime you contact faculty, do show that you've looked at their website or you've looked at a publication, so that you can say, oh, I saw on your website that you do research in this area. I would like to have an informational interview with you to ask you more about that research area because I'm especially interested in potentially working in your lab, right? Sometimes people do informational interviews just because it's an assignment for a class, which is fine. But if you know you're interested in that research, then you might want to communicate that explicitly. Okay, so about 3 minutes left. Yeah, so you meant questions about the research. Yes, you can always contact them to ask questions about the research, but just know if a professor is being contacted by multiple people, and if your email just says, oh, dear professor, your research looks interesting, I want to contact you to ask questions, that's not going to make the best first impression compared to someone who says, I read your website, I'm familiar with your research, and I'd like to contact you and ask you more questions about your research. Yeah. Great. Yeah, those are good questions. And also, I mean, it's not like professors are sitting there judging. It's not a grade. It's not an assignment. They're not like critiquing your email for everything it's missing. It just is a chance for you to show that you're interested, because there are a lot of students interested in research. And if a faculty member gets multiple students, of course they want to try to pick a student that's really excited about the research and not a student that said, oh, I heard I should do research, and so you were just the first person I contacted, right? All right, any last questions? I know an hour is never enough to answer all the questions, but my goal is to give you confidence in contacting graduate students and faculty. Also, knowing that we all know this is a tough time, and There are ways to build skills even if you're not in a research lab. And ultimately, when you apply to graduate school or medical school, if you don't have a research experience, but you say, I did 3 literature reviews, I attended research group meetings, I was involved with the data science initiative, you can still say the things that you did to show that you tried to be proactive and make the most of the time. So. All right. All right, so there is a private question. I won't read who it's from, but just to summarize, if you want to get into a lab, but the lab isn't open, is it a good idea to reach out for a research position or only to join group meetings or have an informational interview? Yes, you could definitely reach out for a research position, although the reality is, of course, they may not be available. So I think it's good to say, I realize during our current COVID situation that you may not have research positions available, but I am still very interested and I would like to have an informational interview and attend your research group meetings. So that shows that you're understanding of the situation, but you're still very motivated, you're still very interested. And then when the research position opens back up, if you've already been attending their research meetings, that's going to give you hopefully that first opportunity. The same thing if you say, oh, I'm interested in writing a literature review, or I'm taking this UWP class, I'd like to focus on some of the research that you're working on. It's showing that you're being proactive. So good. I hope all of that is helpful information. I wish I could wave a magic wand and create 1,000 new research positions. I know that many students are experiencing even more anxiety in addition to the other anxiety. But I also want to remind you that when you apply to medical school, when you apply to graduate schools, people are going to recognize that it's not like, that you didn't try and that there wasn't a pandemic going on. So do your best to build communication skills and take advantage of the fact that while Zoom is not the best platform for in-person interaction, it does force you to build other elements of communication skills. So you are still building skills, and in some ways, these skills for a virtual world may serve you well. Consider there's free coding classes that are also available. There are more opportunities available now that weren't available before. So take advantage of those as much as you can and stay as positive as possible, because I think that the motivation I've seen from students is really positive and inspiring. And I think we're all going to, oh, and the last thing I'll say, and there are more science jobs. Actually, there's been a bump in science jobs. So there is some things to be positive about. All right, well, I will be happy to follow up with as many people as possible. You will I'm going to copy one thing. There is a survey that you will receive an email for, but I want to just do the survey link here so that everyone has it. So it's a Google form. You'll have to be logged in as a UC Davis student, but we're trying to do these larger Q&A sessions, and so we're interested to get feedback about how helpful they are and what other information we can provide. And you'll also get a follow-up email with the survey link in it and some links to remind you about all those website resources that I was mentioning. And these slides are already posted. There may be like one change because I added the Q&A, but the slides other than the Q&As that you submitted are already all posted online as a resource. And this recording will be posted on our website also. All right, well, have a great weekend. Stay safe, and I will maybe see you again soon. All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thanks.